When the world woke up to the whispers of a royal leak, no one expected it to be this. A private file Catherine's sealed medical records mysteriously exposed. What was meant to remain locked in the palace vaults is now unraveling before the public eye. And what it contains isn't just private, it's explosive. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, it seemed like nothing more than internet rumor. A whisper on the fringe, a shadow on an anonymous forum until it wasn't. Screenshots surfaced showing fragments of medical documents allegedly belonging to the Princess of Wales. They weren't just vague notes or misinterpreted summaries. These were detailed, time-stamped entries, complete with official hospital signatures and internal palace memos. The implications? Immediate and devastating. The most private corners of Catherine's life were being torn open, and the world was watching. Buckingham Palace moved fast, issuing a cold, rehearsed denial within hours. But it came too late. The screenshots had already gone viral, picked up by major outlets across Europe and the United States. And the more they tried to deny, the more the fire spread. Commentators questioned the authenticity at first, but it didn't take long before palace insiders began murmuring to trusted journalists. Something was off. Someone inside had clearly turned against the system. The leak wasn't random, it had intent. All signs pointed to an internal palace source. Someone with access not just to the medical information but to the sensitive security codes needed to bypass royal encryption protocols. The documents had been stored in a classified segment of the palace's internal archive system, making this leak not just a breach of privacy but a declaration of war from within the institution itself. And then came the blackout. Multiple British media outlets were abruptly issued legal notices, warning of severe repercussions should they publish or even mention the leak. News anchors froze mid-sentence, headlines vanished, and digital articles were quietly pulled down. The silence was deafening and suspicious. A coordinated attempt to bury the story only served to validate its truth in the eyes of the public. But the real twist came when an anonymous source, allegedly a former royal aide, broke silence with a cryptic message. This isn't about health. It's about betrayal. And they all know it. Within minutes, that single quote exploded across social media. Suddenly, the story was no longer about Catherine's medical files. It was about a deeper, more sinister cover-up. A betrayal so shocking, even those closest to her had no idea it was coming. Now, the monarchy faced not just a scandal, but a reckoning. Royal insiders, once tight-lipped and loyal, began showing signs of panic. Cancelled appearances, closed-door meetings, rushed damage control briefings, everything hinted at a family scrambling to control a narrative that had slipped through their fingers. And in the center of it all stood Catherine, silent, exposed, and betrayed. But before the media could even digest the shock, an insider stepped forward with claims that turned concern into fury. It wasn't just a health scare, it was a secret diagnosis. Buried in files, never disclosed to Catherine herself. How could the future queen be the last to know about her own body? The palace didn't just keep the public in the dark, they kept her there too. As the leaked documents continued to circulate, a new, more disturbing revelation emerged. Catherine's medical records referenced a diagnosis made nearly 7 years ago. A serious condition. One that required immediate treatment and lifestyle adjustments. But nowhere in the leaked communication was there a single note of Catherine being informed. Instead, the decision to withhold the diagnosis was buried beneath coded language and senior-level authorizations, suggesting a disturbing truth: the decision was intentional. She wasn't just kept in the dark, she was strategically excluded. The trail of concealment led straight to the highest corridors of royal power. Senior members of the family had allegedly signed off on the suppression, citing reasons that sent shockwaves through Catherine's inner circle. One aide, who remained anonymous for fear of retribution, claimed the justification used was Catherine's supposed emotional instability. A phrase repeated in the internal memos like a mantra, cold, calculated, and deeply damning. As if labeling her fragile somehow made it acceptable to rob her of agency over her own life. Legal experts watching the scandal unfold began asking urgent questions. Was this medical malpractice? Could this be considered abuse? The implications weren't just political, they were criminal. Specialists in royal law suggested the palace had crossed a line. Deliberately withholding a diagnosis from an adult, especially one in such a high-profile and high-pressure role, wasn't just ethically wrong, it could be a breach of human rights. The monarchy, always cloaked in protocol and discretion, now stood accused of violating the very core of personal freedom. Even more chilling were the medical notes themselves. Buried in the files were signs that the truth may have been manipulated. Words were crossed out and rewritten. Recommendations for psychological evaluation were inserted long after the original consultations had been concluded. It wasn't just omission, it was fabrication. Someone had altered Catherine's medical story, and they did it from within the palace walls. Whether it was to maintain the illusion of strength or to preserve an image of perfection, it became clear the truth was never meant to reach her. Catherine's closest friends, the ones who had stood by her during pregnancies, public pressure, and relentless scrutiny, were blindsided. None of them had any knowledge of the diagnosis. They recalled moments, fatigue, unexplained symptoms, periods of isolation, but had assumed it was the burden of royal life. Now they realized the signs were there all along. But Catherine had never known to question them. The betrayal wasn't just institutional, it was personal. The people meant to protect her had quietly decided she didn't need the truth. Or worse, they decided she couldn't handle it. And as public outrage brews, the focus shifts to who made the decision, and why someone so close to her would authorize such silence. What if the one person you trusted most was part of the cover-up? The files reveal something darker. Prince William may have known about the diagnosis long before Catherine did. And his silence isn't just shocking, it's devastating. The timeline was clear. Buried deep in the metadata of the leaked documents was a chain of briefings, meetings, and confidential correspondences. One of them, dated weeks before Catherine's alleged awareness of her condition, showed William's name. Not only was he informed, he was involved in the drafting of the palace's internal communication strategy, a plan delicately labeled under the codename Protocol Aegis. The purpose? To manage information flow, to contain Catherine's diagnosis, and most chillingly, to delay telling her until it was deemed appropriate by royal advisors. For a man who had vowed to protect her, this was more than silence. It was participation. Private communications obtained by investigative journalists only deepened the wound. Memos between royal advisors and William suggested he'd been advised that sharing the diagnosis immediately would destabilize morale and compromise Catherine's ability to fulfill her role. The excuse was bureaucratic. The impact was personal. He didn't push back. He didn't object. He followed orders. And when the truth finally reached Catherine long after everyone else knew, her world shattered. Behind the palace gates, the fallout was immediate. Insiders described nights of silence between the couple, tension that could be felt in the corridors. One source close to the family claimed Catherine confronted William in a closed-door meeting that ended with her demanding answers he couldn't give. Not because he didn't have them, but because the truth was unbearable. He had chosen the monarchy over her. Not once, repeatedly. In her eyes, the betrayal wasn't just professional, it was intimate. Those who had once celebrated the image of the perfect couple now found themselves questioning everything. The fairy tale had cracked, and through those cracks poured revelations of loyalty tested, trust broken, and a marriage strained by secrets. The public, who had long embraced William and Catherine as the future of the monarchy, began to reevaluate what lay behind the polished smiles and orchestrated appearances. If even Catherine could be blindsided, what did that say about the institution surrounding her? For Catherine, the pain wasn't just in what had happened, it was in who had let it happen. William's silence became a symbol of the palace's ruthless efficiency. A reminder that even love, within these walls, could be subordinated to tradition and control. The woman who had stood beside him through every storm was left wondering if she ever truly knew the man beside her. Yet even this betrayal pales in comparison to what was found next, something the palace buried even deeper. There's a gap, a blank space in the royal timeline. And it wasn't by accident. A period of Catherine's treatment was erased from every official document. Where was she, and why was every trace of that year meticulously deleted? For nearly 12 months, Catherine all but disappeared from the record. No official engagements, no medical appointments, no travel logs. Even her security detail, normally assigned and tracked with precision, had their logs scrubbed. It began with a series of hospital stays referenced in the original leaked files, only to find those same entries blacked out in the palace archives. Redacted. Removed. Hidden. Not just from public eyes, but from those within her own inner circle. Every follow-up appointment, every physician's note gone. What remained was a deliberate vacuum of information, a silence too exact to be coincidental. That silence cracked when one of the documents referenced a non-domestic relocation for advanced private care. Cross-referencing timelines, investigators traced a potential lead to an exclusive overseas facility, known for its experimental treatment programs and high-profile clientele. But the connection wasn't made through official records. It came from a leaked private flight manifest, one that showed Catherine's initials, escorted by 2 unnamed palace aides and a medical consultant, arriving quietly in the early hours of a fog-shrouded morning. No announcement, no coverage, just a departure from England and a descent into mystery. Even the royal household's physician, whose name had appeared regularly in Catherine's medical records, was suddenly erased from that entire year's chain of documentation. Attempts to trace his involvement during that time hit a wall of legal barricades and NDAs. He had, according to one anonymous insider, been instructed to cease reference to all activity concerning the princess's health for that duration. And when pressed, those closest to the medical staff whispered of pressure from the top, orders wrapped in threats. Silence demanded, not requested. Security personnel who typically rotated through her detail were also abruptly reassigned. The few who remained were bound to secrecy by extended confidentiality agreements. But off the record, one former royal guard hinted at something darker. He described the year as a vanishing, marked by a strict communication blackout. No calls, no visitors, no trace. When asked where she had gone, he simply replied, "That's not for anyone to know. Not even her." Those closest to Catherine outside the royal institution noticed the absence but were given no answers. Longtime friends described receiving vague messages. Her siblings were reportedly told she was resting due to exhaustion. Yet the timeline didn't match. The Catherine they remembered, bright, articulate, resilient, had simply vanished. And when she reappeared, she was quieter, more careful, changed. What happened during that missing year became a question no one dared to ask, but everyone feared the answer to. And just as Catherine began piecing the truth together, a shadow from her past returned with evidence the palace never expected to see daylight. A journal never meant to be found. Camilla's handwritten entries, blunt, mocking, and deeply cruel, expose what she really thought of Catherine's condition. And it reveals a toxic undercurrent in the royal household no one wanted exposed. When the pages surfaced, there was no denying their authenticity. The handwriting, the date stamps, the ink pressed into the paper, with a kind of careless venom, it was all unmistakably Camilla's. What began as a personal diary quickly revealed itself to be something far more sinister, a window into a private vendetta that had unfolded in silence behind palace doors. In those pages, Catherine wasn't spoken of with concern or empathy. She was dismissed as a fragile liability, a phrase scrawled repeatedly, almost obsessively, throughout the entries. It wasn't just judgment, it was contempt, sharpened like a dagger. Among the most chilling discoveries was an entry dated shortly after Catherine's private diagnosis. Camilla had written about removing her from duties quietly, noting that a quiet sidelining will avoid press hysteria. It was clear this wasn't a case of casual gossip. It was a calculated scheme to eliminate Catherine from influence without provoking public backlash. She wasn't just being erased from royal records, there had been intent to erase her from relevance altogether. And Camilla wasn't operating alone. Staff who had once dismissed rumors of tension began speaking in hushed tones. According to leaked testimonies, royal aides were allegedly encouraged to monitor Catherine's behavior and report anything that could be framed as instability. Some were told to manage her public perception, ensuring that her appearances aligned with a specific narrative, one of elegance, yes, but also delicacy. The image of a woman too fragile to bear the weight of royal responsibility. A lie carefully constructed. And Camilla was its chief architect. Legal experts brought in to review the journal's contents didn't hesitate to raise alarms. Some labeled it emotional manipulation. Others hinted at a broader pattern of institutional abuse, suggesting Catherine had been subjected to a psychological campaign designed to disempower her. Whatever the legal classification, the moral indictment was clear. Camilla's words had crossed a line, and they had done damage that could not be undone. When Catherine was finally made aware of the journal, her reaction was not explosive. It was heartbreak. Those close to her revealed she was shattered, not just by the cruelty of the words, but by their confirmation of something she had long feared in silence, that she was never truly welcomed into the royal fold, and that her struggles were never seen as real. They were seen as weakness, and weakness, in this house, was not forgiven, it was exploited. But while the palace plotted to protect its image, another force was silently working against them, Princess Anne. In the midst of chaos, a surprising ally emerges. Princess Anne, known for her stoic loyalty, quietly breaks ranks. What she uncovers and who she confronts may have saved Catherine from being erased entirely. While the rest of the royal household scrambled to contain the growing inferno, Anne did what few expected. She started asking questions. Not for headlines, not for drama, but for justice. It began with a document sent to her office by mistake. A brief medical summary referencing Catherine's condition, oddly inconsistent with earlier records Anne had seen. The dates didn't align. The tone was sterilized. Her instincts kicked in. She compared notes from prior years quietly, methodically, and what she found was undeniable. The summaries had been altered, details missing, language softened. A revision of truth crafted with surgical precision. Anne took her findings straight to Charles, not as a sister but as a soldier confronting a failing general. Behind closed doors, the tension was electric. Sources say Anne accused him, not of direct malice but of complacency, of turning a blind eye while those beneath him orchestrated a campaign of silence and suppression. Charles, blindsided, offered no defense, because he had none. Anne demanded change not just for Catherine, but for the integrity of the monarchy itself. But her demands weren't met with action. They were met with resistance. Knowing the institution wouldn't act, Anne did something few in her position would dare. She went to Catherine directly. Under the cover of secrecy, she arranged a private meeting at Kensington Palace. No advisors, no aides, just the two of them. And for the first time, Catherine was told the full truth, not the edited version she had been fed, but the raw facts. The falsified records, the concealed timelines, the betrayals. It wasn't pity Anne offered. It was clarity. And it came with a challenge: they've written your story for too long. It's time you take the pen back. From that moment, Catherine changed. Quietly, subtly, but powerfully. The woman who had once walked within the confines of royal protocol began to question every script, every directive, every expectation, and Anne stood beside her, not in front, not as a shield but as a witness to her rising. Of course, the palace didn't take kindly to Anne's involvement. Senior aides moved swiftly, attempting to isolate her, cut off her access, reassign her engagements. But Anne was immovable, and for the first time in decades, the so-called hardest-working royal became the most defiant. It was the beginning of a quiet rebellion, one not fought with banners or declarations, but with truth. A rebellion led by women who refused to be controlled. And as the foundation of silence began to tremble, so too did the illusion of unity the monarchy had desperately clung to for years. But as alliances shift and truths surface, the palace faces a new kind of threat: public reckoning. They thought the cover-up would stay buried, but the people won't let it die. Protesters gather, media explodes, and Catherine becomes a symbol of suppressed truth. The monarchy hasn't faced this kind of backlash in decades. What began as whispers on obscure forums had ignited into a global reckoning. Within hours of the latest leak, #JusticeForCatherine surged across social media platforms like a tidal wave. It wasn't just royal watchers or anti-monarchists fueling the fire. This was different. This was universal. Journalists, mental health advocates, women's rights organizations, and ordinary citizens demanded answers. They weren't just angry. They were united. Catherine had become more than a royal figure. She was now the face of every woman silenced, manipulated, or pushed into the shadows by powerful institutions. Former palace employees, previously shackled by confidentiality agreements and the weight of loyalty, began speaking out anonymously at first. Their statements confirmed the unthinkable. Yes, the documents were real. Yes, the manipulation was deliberate. And yes, the chain of command went higher than anyone had guessed. They described backroom discussions, drafted scripts for public appearances, instructions on how to subtly discredit Catherine's moments of independence. Some admitted they didn't understand what they were part of until the pieces were laid bare. Others had known and stayed silent until now. Pressure mounted. Prominent media outlets, initially hesitant to challenge the palace directly, now broke ranks. Editors ran hard-hitting editorials demanding accountability. Major networks halted royal programming and replaced it with investigative panels. Public broadcasters demanded interviews with senior aides. Even allies of the monarchy began calling for transparency. The illusion of control the royals had so carefully preserved was unraveling fast. Then came the petition. What started with a few thousand digital signatures ballooned into millions overnight. The public wasn't asking anymore, they were demanding. An independent inquiry into the concealment of Catherine's medical records, into the manipulation of her public image, into the question of whether a member of the royal family had been emotionally, psychologically, and institutionally abused in plain sight. Parliament, reluctant to touch royal affairs, was now under pressure from its own constituents. Silence was no longer an option. The front gates of Kensington Palace became a symbol of resistance. Flowers, protest signs, candles, and handwritten letters covered the iron bars. Crowds gathered, not in rage but in solidarity. Mothers brought daughters. Survivors shared stories. A new narrative was born not of a scandal but of a movement. Catherine was no longer just a princess, she was a mirror held up to a crumbling system. Inside the palace, the royal PR machine moved at full force. But it was like trying to catch fire with bare hands. Carefully crafted statements were met with immediate backlash. Attempts to redirect the conversation failed. The press wasn't letting go, and neither was the public. For the first time in recent memory, the institution's voice had been drowned out by the people's. And just as the world demands accountability, a final revelation breaks something even Catherine wasn't prepared to face. Buried within the medical files is something no one expected: a disputed DNA record tied to one of Catherine's pregnancies. Could this be the real reason the palace worked so hard to hide the truth? If proven true, it would shake the line of succession itself. Among the sea of redacted files, one document had gone unnoticed until now. A single DNA report, misfiled under a pseudonym, suddenly surfaced. At first, it seemed like an administrative error. But when cross-referenced with the timeline of Catherine's third pregnancy, the implications became chilling. The test didn't match standard prenatal procedures. It was more specific, more invasive, and its origin was traced to a private clinic known for discreet, high-level genetic testing. And the results, according to a whistleblower, had been altered. Not to mislead Catherine, but to mislead the institution itself. The question wasn't whether a test was done. The question was, what were they trying to hide? Whispers grew louder. Maternity questions began circulating around Prince Louis, a child born into royal privilege with little controversy until now. The DNA discrepancy didn't suggest scandal in the conventional sense, but rather something more dangerous to the monarchy: uncertainty. A single line of succession is the crown's lifeblood. One crack in that foundation, one questioned legitimacy, and the entire structure trembles. This wasn't just about a family secret, it was about the future of the throne. According to a second source, a lab technician involved in processing the test was threatened anonymously within days of completing the results. Not once. Repeatedly. Emails vanished. Phone numbers disconnected. Another technician, when approached by a journalist, declined to speak but visibly trembled at the mention of the palace. If there was nothing to hide, why were people being silenced? Why had the report been misfiled under a false identity and removed from all royal archives? The palace's desperation for control now seemed less like damage control and more like fear. Documents were not only redacted but allegedly destroyed. Files that existed 1 month were gone the next. And behind the scenes, officials scrambled to track every copy, every person who had even seen a glimpse of the report. A sweeping effort to erase not just the content but the question itself. And that question now echoed through every corner of public discourse. Why would the royals go to such lengths unless they knew the truth could destroy them? And at the heart of it all stood Catherine. According to close confidants, she had no knowledge of the test until weeks ago. When the details were finally revealed to her, she was said to be devastated, emotionally wrecked not just by the deception, but by the reality that her own child had become a pawn in the palace's power games. Everything she believed in, everything she stood for, was now entangled in a lie she never asked for and never saw coming. And now, standing before the world, the princess has only one choice: to stay silent, or tell the truth in her own words. After weeks of silence, the world turns its gaze to one woman, Catherine. As cameras flash and millions watch live, she steps forward to speak. What she says next will either heal the monarchy or tear it apart forever. The moment had been building like a tidal wave, pushed forward by weeks of leaks, betrayals, and revelations. And now, with the world on edge and the monarchy teetering on the edge of credibility, Catherine finally stepped into the storm. Her voice, composed but trembling with emotion, didn't begin with blame, it began with truth. Not the whole truth. Not yet. But enough to ignite something far more powerful than outrage: hope. In her statement, she confirmed key pieces of the story that had consumed global headlines. The diagnosis was real. The concealment, deliberate. The pain, unimaginable. But she stopped short of offering names or pointing fingers. And that silence, though poised, carried more weight than any accusation ever could. Her restraint was strategic. As she spoke of trust broken and privacy betrayed, she also reminded the public of dignity, the kind that cannot be taken, even when everything else has been. But it was one line that sent ripples across the world. Not everything that's true needs to be spoken yet. With those words, Catherine didn't just hint at deeper secrets. She issued a warning. A message not to the public but to the institution that tried to silence her. Her truth wasn't finished. It was only paused. She refused to identify who authorized the cover-up or who altered her records. She didn't reveal who had orchestrated the erasure of a year of her life or who had tried to fracture her family from within. That silence left a vacuum, one the media rushed to fill. Speculation surged. Analysts dissected every pause, every inflection. Was it protection? Was it fear? Or was it strategy holding back just enough to force the palace into checkmate? The public reaction was instant and divided. Some praised her restraint, calling it noble, even regal. Others demanded more names, accountability, consequences. But what united them all was the realization that Catherine was no longer the figure they once believed her to be. She wasn't just a princess, she was a survivor, a fighter, a woman who had been pushed to the edge and chose not to fall but to rise. And as she stood there, dignified and alone, the royal family said nothing. No statement, no support. Not even a glance from behind palace windows. Catherine had become a sovereign voice in a world built to suppress hers. And whether the monarchy could survive that shift was a question that no PR strategy could answer. But one thing is clear: nothing will ever be the same again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.